The chair now recognizes Mr. Lambert for the purpose of an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment represents part of the New START Implementation Act, a legislative package introduced last week and co-sponsored by Chairman McKeon, Mr. Turner, myself, and other members of the committee. And this amendment would do three things. First, it would freeze funding for New START reductions if promised nuclear modernization does not proceed. Two, prohibits cuts to our hedge stockpile until certain technical milestones are met. And three, require Congress to be involved in future decisions to cut our nuclear forces, both deployed and non-deployed. In the first place, this amendment would hold this and future administrations accountable to the promises made during the New START Treaty ratification debates last year. In particular, the grand bargain, quote unquote, that treaty ratification would proceed if the administration agreed to a much-needed 10-year nuclear modernization program. In this regard, less than 2 months ago, every single member, all 16 members of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee of both parties, wrote a letter to Budget Chairman Paul Ryan urging the importance of this commitment. With this bipartisan support, the Ryan budget, now the House budget, did indeed commit full funding for weapons modernization. The difficulty with the bargain that the Senate struck with the New START Treaty is that Congress cannot appropriate money in advance for a 10-year period. So we are dependent upon the good faith and continued commitment of the executive branch, including future executives not yet elected. The memory of last year's debate and the need for modernization may or may not last a full 10 years. So we need mechanisms to influence the future through the life of this treaty or even beyond to make sure promises are kept. Now, this provision is carefully crafted to avoid producing a treaty default. However, it would make implementation more cumbersome and thus provide incentives to keep up the modernization. As we proceed with reductions, it becomes all the more important that our strategic posture remains coherent and our deterrent remains credible. As the President noted in a November report to Congress, this bill of paying for modernization has to be paid even in difficult economic conditions, and I hope we would all agree with that. So we must now move to create what Tom D'Agostino, the head of the National Nuclear Security Administration, has called a sustainable deterrent. And we don't have that yet. Despite the administration's pledge of just a few months ago to embark on a 10-year program, and for the funding request along with that for fiscal year 12, we're going to have to watch this for 10 full years. So we've only just begun on this. This amendment would also do a couple other things. It would put the brakes on any efforts by this administration to race down a road to further and what I think would be ill-advised cuts in our nuclear weapons in the future that don't include the interaction of Congress. Recent statements by administration officials, including National Security Advisor Donlin, have given this cause for concern. And to do this unilaterally without Congress being involved, whether it's the Senate or the House, I don't think is a good idea. So another limitation contained in this amendment is to preclude premature cuts to our non-deployed hedge stockpile. Once again, this is something that comments have been made that cause concern. So based on reports and testimony by NNSA, if we were to cut our non-deployed hedge stockpile before the modernization was done, should not be done until we have new facilities that are up and running, quote unquote. And these are new plutonium and uranium facilities. According to the NNSA, these are needed to meet the criteria for the administration's own 2010 Nuclear Posture Review. So the second part of this amendment would prohibit cuts to the non-deployed hedge stockpile until these two important facilities are indeed up and running, fully operational. That may not take, that may not be done until 2023 or 2024, but the seriousness of this requires that we remain vigilant to make sure that these important steps are taken between now and then. The last part of this amendment would amend the U.S. Code so that all future reductions would have to require the involvement of Congress either through legislation or the treaty process.
Time has expired.
Okay. I would urge adoption of the amendment. I yield back.